Besides sharing the same title, director Scott Derrickson's version of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness would have been an entirely different movie than the finished version, which was directed by Spider-Man Sam Raimi. Originally envisioned as Marvel's first horror film, Derrickson's version wouldn't have featured Wanda as the villain. Instead, it would have featured Nightmare, one of Doctor Strange's main adversaries in the comics, and the ruler of the Dream Dimension, as the film would have explored the terrifying power of nightmares. So let's dive in and find out what happened behind the scenes that led the film to be changed, and also take a look at what could have been Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. While writing Doctor Strange, director Scott Derrickson and writer C. Robert Cargill were told by Marvel to save some of the comic's bolder concepts for the sequel, as Marvel was worried they'd be too weird and confusing for audiences in an origin story. For example, Derrickson explored using Nightmare as the film's villain, but decided against it because he felt it was too complex to introduce the idea of nightmares themselves being a dimension alongside everything else they were introducing, like the Dark Dimension. For those unfamiliar, Nightmare is a fear lord and the ruler of the Dream Dimension, a realm where human subconscious minds travel to while they sleep. Nightmare feeds off the fear generated by nightmares and roams this realm on his demonic black horse, Dreamstalker. Once the film came out, Derrickson remarked that it was merely the tip of the iceberg. He expressed his desire to emulate the approach of The Dark Knight with his Doctor Strange sequel by introducing a villain like the Joker that would significantly raise the stakes, so that he could create a deeper, more intense, and visceral experience for Strange and audiences. Derrickson envisioned the sequel as Marvel's first horror film, packed with psychedelic weirdness and villains from other dimensions and worlds. However, Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige would later walk back on those comments, clarifying that the sequel wouldn't be a horror film, but rather contain several scary sequences, similar to the set pieces in Temple of Doom and Poltergeist. For example, we would have seen a flashback of Steven and his sister Donna, depicting her tragic death at a lake house after falling through the ice on a frozen lake, with Steven unable to save her from drowning. This scene was actually shot but cut from the final version of the first film. In the sequel, however, Strange would have been forced to confront this painful memory during a nightmare sequence, with Nightmare tormenting him by exploiting one of Strange's deepest regrets. This idea actually progressed quite far, with set blueprints designed to bring the haunting vision to life. Mock-ups were also created for Nightmare to appear in ancient text illustrations, where Strange would learn about the Fear Lord. Originally, Wanda wouldn't have been the film's villain. In fact, at one point she would have joined Strange on his adventure, which you can see in this early concept art of the Incursion universe that was more of a desert filled with Dead Strange variants. To set Wanda's inclusion in the film up, the in-universe commercials in WandaVision were going to be messages from Strange to Wanda, in an attempt to help her, with Strange potentially even appearing in one of the ads. Eventually, Strange would have arrived in the final episode of the season, where he would have become her mentor, and taken Wanda on as a student, teaching her the mystic arts. However, the idea was scrapped because Marvel felt it not only shifted the focus away from Wanda, but they were uncomfortable with ending the show as a setup for the next Marvel property. As they grew concerned, they were developing a reputation for each film and show feeling like mere promotional tools for future projects, and wanted to avoid that perception. Not only that, but Feige didn't like the idea of a white male showing up and mansplaining to Wanda how her power works. And while the original idea was for Wanda to join Strange on his adventure and learn from him, the plan was for her to become slowly corrupted by the Darkhold throughout the movie, setting her up as a future villain for another movie or even the Avengers. However, Michael Waldron, who took over scripting duties once Sam Raimi came aboard as director, didn't want to pass up using Scarlet Witch as the villain for the film and thus made her the primary antagonist. Shuma-Gorath is alleged to have had a much larger role in the original version of the film, versus ending up as a disposable monster in the finished version that was renamed to Gargantos due to rights issues with the character's name. Wendigo is also likely to have appeared, considering one of the sets is called Wendigo Forest. Not only that, but Kevin Feige originally wanted to use the film as a way to introduce some of the supernatural elements that will be present in Blade, with the multiverse as a way to explain why there's suddenly supernatural monsters in the MCU. Christine wouldn't have appeared in the film at all. Instead, Clea would have taken her place as Strange's love interest, rather than just making a brief cameo in the mid-credits scene in the final version. In the comics, Clea is a powerful sorceress, and the niece of Dormammu, the ruler of the Dark Dimension. Over time, she and Strange develop a deep romantic relationship, often fighting alongside each other against mystical threats. So what went wrong? Director Scott Derrickson found himself at odds with Marvel, as he and the studio had entirely different visions for what the movie should be. After realizing that he was compromising too much of what he wanted the film to be to meet Marvel's demands, he decided to drop out of the film and direct The Black Phone instead, where he'd have creative control, a project he had planned to tackle after finishing Multiverse of Madness anyway. To replace him, Marvel hired Sam Raimi, director of the first 3 Spider-Man films, who would be joined by Loki head writer Michael Waldron to write the script. Their original plan was to take the bones of what Derrickson had already come up with and get that into shape to shoot in 3 months, giving Waldron 3 weeks to write the script. script. However, halfway through that third week of writing, COVID hit and the world shut down. As a result, Marvel would push the release date of the film, allowing Raimi and Waldron to start over from scratch. Not only that, but COVID caused the release dates of Marvel's entire Phase 4 slate of films to be changed, as Spider-Man No Way Home was originally supposed to come out after Multiverse of Madness and not before. This change would have consequences for both films, as Multiverse of Madness was intended to be Strange's introduction, and the audiences for that matter, into the multiverse. In fact, after being introduced in Multiverse of Madness, America Chavez was supposed to then show up in No Way Home, and be the one to bring Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield into the MCU, to help Tom Holland's Peter Parker, instead of Ned. She also would have been part of the film's final battle, as she's seen here hanging off a crane hook holding what looks to be the cure for Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. The concept art of Chavez also resembles actor Isabella Merced, best known for Dora in the Lost City of Gold, instead of Xochitl Gomez, who eventually landed the part. Had Multiverse of Madness come out first, it's possible that Merced may have played Chavez, while Strange would have come into No Way Home with not only having had some real experience with the multiverse, but dealing with a kid as well, which would have better informed his interactions with Peter, Ned, and MJ. Additionally, Spider-Man was supposed to appear for a very brief cameo in the Multiverse of Madness. To help establish Wanda as a villain and a legitimate threat, Waldron was inspired by the cocky Space Marines and aliens who get slaughtered by the Xenomorphs not long after they touch down on the alien planet. He wanted to do something similar with Wanda by introducing the Illuminati, made up of heroes that fans would be excited to see, only to have Wanda easily kill them off. The original Illuminati lineup, however, was very different. Daniel Craig originally was set to appear as Thor's half-brother Balder the Brave, but since the film was shot during COVID, Craig backed out as he didn't feel a single day of filming was worth the risk of catching the virus and potentially spreading it to his family. His character would be replaced by Reed Richards. Additionally, an Ironmonger variant was also set to appear, but replaced by Black Bolt, while an even earlier version of this sequence featured a Wasp variant. Deadpool was also considered after Disney's acquisition of Fox, which gave Marvel the character's film rights, but it was decided that this wasn't the right time or place to introduce him into the MCU. And while Waldron mostly got his desired lineup of heroes, one he wanted to include was Tom Cruise as an Iron Man variant from the unproduced film from the 90s, but Marvel didn't bother approaching the actor since he was tied up filming Mission Impossible. The Mordo from the first film was also originally killed at the start of the second film, while attempting to go after Wanda to take her power since he knew she was corrupted by the Darkhold. Unfortunately for him, she would have decapitated him as he's about to say the bill comes due. Wanda then would have presented his head to Strange later in the film. Even the scene where Strange meets an alternate version of Mordo, which director Sam Raimi shot like his western The Quick and the Dead, using extreme close-ups as if both wizards were gunfighters facing off, was almost cut by Feige for being too corny. However, Raimi pleaded with Feige to let him keep the scene in, which Feige eventually allowed, telling Raimi, "Okay, fine, have your corny stuff." What Feige overlooks, though, is that in addition to establishing the backstory and mistrust between the two characters, this scene lulls the audience into a false sense of security, making us believe that this version of Mordo can be trusted, only for Strange to be betrayed and imprisoned by him a few scenes later. This debate between Feige and Raimi over keeping the scene sheds some light on just how much control Feige has over his directors. If Raimi had to fight to keep a scene as simple as this, that served a purpose which seems to have possibly flown over Feige's head, leading him to want to cut it simply because he felt how Raimi shot it was corny, it makes you wonder how much Derrickson had to battle to keep his ideas in the film before he eventually got fed up and walked away. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content.